Do you believe in destiny? Blue Beetle definitely wants to. He's a legacy hero whose mantle passed from a mystic champion to a gadget-building genius, before winding up with a teenager who never applied for the job in the first place. He may have stumbled upon the powerful scarab, but it can't have been just dumb luck. There had to be a purpose or some grand design. If it was only chance, then maybe the power was never really his to begin with, and he was about to discover that he'd gotten far more than he'd bargained for. And his story was really well demonstrated in the cartoon Batman, the Brave and the Bold. But before I go to how this character was used in the show, let's go back to the character's comic book history. The original Blue Beetle was Dan Garrett, a Golden Age adventurer who discovered an ancient magical scarab which gave him superpowers. Dan's tenure was brief in the grand scheme of comic book history, but he set the tone of the character. Before his death, Dan passed the mantle to his student and friend Ted Cord, asking him to carry the legacy forward. However, Ted didn't have superpowers, the mystical scarab was unresponsive, and so they buried it alongside Dan, and Ted did what brilliant, stubborn young men do. He built his own legend. He was a genius inventor and Olympic-level athlete. Ted developed an arsenal of gadgets, creating his signature aircraft, the Bug, and wielded a compressed air weapon that could blind or disable enemies without lethal force. He later joined the Justice League during its light-hearted 1980s era, forming an iconic partnership with Booster Gold, a double act built on ego and comedy. But Ted's story had a tragic end, at least before continuity got reset again. During Infinite Crisis, he uncovered a conspiracy involving Max Lord and was murdered for it, dying alone because he refused to compromise his principles. And then the Scarab returned. After the destruction of the Rock of Eternity, the Scarab fell into a vacant lot in El Paso, Texas, where it was found by a high school student named Jaime Reyes. Jaime was a teenager from a working-class Mexican-American family, living a normal life until the scarab bonded onto his spine and encased him in living biomechanical armor. Unlike Dan's mystical connection or Ted's technological workaround, Jaime's relationship with the scarab was interactive. It spoke to him and adapted to his needs, creating weapons, wings, shields, and sometimes acted without his consent. For all his power, he was completely inexperienced and was immediately thrown into the deep end. Ultimately, Jaime was chosen by something he didn't understand, and then had to decide what that choice meant. He is the youngest Blue Beetle, the least prepared, and the most overwhelmed, but still a top-tier hero. And that's reflected in the fact that he co-starred in the very first episode of Batman, the Brave and the Bold. This was a series built on team-ups, and the sheer joy of watching Batman share the screen with the vast, and sometimes strange, corners of the DC universe. It could have opened with anyone, a founding Justice League or a fan favourite icon, a guaranteed ratings magnet. I mean, technically the pre-credits team-up was with Green Arrow, but that's not really the same thing. Instead, the very first co-star was Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes. This series was heavily inspired by the old Silver Age stories, but that doesn't mean it was old-fashioned. The show wasn't just about Batman's adventures with legends, it was just as much about Batman encountering the next generation and mentoring them. Jaime is not presented as a polished successor. When we first meet him, he's sitting in his bedroom watching Batman and Green Arrow beat up the Clock King on television with his friend Paco. He asks Paco if he could see him as a hero. The answer is a resounding nope. And that's the very first image we get of this Blue Beetle, a kid who doesn't believe he belongs in the same sentence as the word hero, and then Batman comes to his window. The series could have staged Jaime's transformation as a triumphant arrival. Instead, it is chaotic. The Scarab takes control, rocketing him into space and dragging him and Batman through a wormhole. He's so inexperienced it's almost painful to watch, and that's what makes him the perfect first partner. Batman is competent to the point of absurdity. He's famously always prepared for every eventuality. Placing him beside someone uncertain, inexperienced, and questioning his own worth creates contrast. The question of whether he deserves the mantle spans 3 key episodes: Rise of the Blue Beetle, Fall of the Blue Beetle, and Revenge of the Reach, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. Ultimately, Jaime wonders if he is truly worthy of the mantle of Blue Beetle, but the fact that he has these doubts is exactly why he's the right person for the job. Case in point, in his debut episode, the pair arrive on a distant world and the inhabitants, the Gibbles, mistake him for a returning savior, an earlier wielder of the Scarab. Batman plays along, encouraging Jaime to inspire them. Maybe if he succeeds, he'll also inspire himself. Suddenly, this insecure teenager is expected to lead an uprising against Kanjar-Ro, and he bluffs his way through it. Jaime delivers a speech about the power within, and the Gibbles take it seriously and they rise up against Kanjaro. And you know what? They succeed, at least for a little while. Kanjaro casually mentions killing a previous Blue Beetle with the Gamma Gong, and just like that we're reminded that his mantle has history, and that the history includes failure and death. When Kanjaro strips Jaime of the scarab, the armor is gone and he's just a kid again, powerless and frightened. Yet he doesn't wait for someone else to come save him. He escapes, snatches the Gamma Gong, and defeats the villain himself, further demonstrating his worthiness. By the end of the episode, the Gibbles erect 2 statues. One of Batman, modest and respectful. One of Blue Beetle, towering and triumphant. Visually, it is absurd. Jaime's monument dwarfs the Dark Knight, but emotionally, it's perfect. The statue represents how others see him, a savior, but inside the armor is still a teenager who isn't entirely convinced he deserves it. Even after this victory, Jaime still believes he isn't living up to his predecessors. And that feeling sets the stage for the question that defines the next chapter. If he's standing in someone else's shadow, what happened to the hero who came before him? The next Blue Beetle episode, Fall of the Blue Beetle, opens in the past with Batman alongside the Silver Age Blue Beetle Ted Kord. In many ways, he's the opposite of Jaime. He's confident, inventive, bantering mid-mission. He doesn't have any special powers or abilities. Nothing but his fists and his wits, and he clearly belongs in the same room as Batman. Jaime, meanwhile, is plagued by doubt. He recounts the origin of the Green Lantern to his friend Paso, how a dying alien crash-landed on Earth and his ring set out to find a worthy successor. Paso scoffs at the idea. There was no design, he argues. Whoever got the ring was just lucky. This reflects Jaime's own anxieties about his role as Blue Beetle. Was he chosen for a role, or was it just random chance? When Batman compares him unfavorably to the previous Blue Beetle, it stings because it confirms Jaime's worst fear. He's not measuring up to someone he's never even met. So Jaime searches for answers, breaking into Ted Kord's old base before heading to his last known location. And it's here that he meets Ted Kord. While he initially says all the right things, he wants to end world hunger and homelessness, and claims to have sent the scarab out to find a worthy successor while he focused on the big picture problems, in reality he's a bitter old man. Those worker drones are really soldiers intended for enforcing global order. Jaime is tricked into using the scarab to power the drones and soon realizes his mistake. Batman also arrives and reveals the truth. This is not Ted Kord, it's Ted's uncle Jarvis. The real Ted Kord had died while stopping Jarvis's earlier attempt at world domination. Ted couldn't make the scarab work, so he loaned it to his inventor uncle to see if he could activate it. In the meantime, he decided to be a hero in his own way, using his ingenuity to create gadgets. However, when he and Batman learned that Jarvis planned to misuse the scarab, they intervened. While Batman held off the drones, Ted sabotaged the rocket carrying Jarvis's army and was killed in the explosion. His final act was taking the scarab and sending it out to find a suitable replacement, trusting that somewhere out there was a better bearer. And Jaime is the end result of Ted's final act of faith. The emotional center of the episode is Batman finally explaining why he kept the truth hidden. He didn't think Jaime was ready to carry the weight of that sacrifice, but Jaime was ready for it. The fact that he questions himself proves he is ready. Jaime honors Ted with his legacy by rejecting what Jarvis had become, and by being his own man. By the end of the episode, after Jaime saves Batman's life using the bug to fight off the remaining drones, talk about mixing both worlds, Jaime apologizes for obsessing over the scarab's origin. He desperately wanted to be special, for there to be a plan and for him to have a role in it, and Batman tells him he was chosen. The scarab clearly chose him. It let him access the power much in the same way that Dan Garrett had. There may not have been some grand plan, but his actions make him a hero, and that is what counts. Which is a wonderful message to end on. However, the episode Revenge of the Reach comes close to upending everything, revealing that there really was a plan behind him getting the scarab, just not a wholesome one. After defeating the villain Evil Star on his own, Jaime decides to show his independence by delivering him to Oa, the home of the Green Lanterns. But once there, he doesn't get the hero's welcome he expected. The Green Lanterns are openly hostile towards him because of his armor. They want him to disarm and stand down, but he refuses. The Guardians of the Universe reveal that the Scarab is a weapon created by the Reach, an ancient imperial force that seeds worlds with heroes. They build trust, and when least expected, they activate their primary program and lead an invasion. Jaime realizes that he's a sleeper agent and he had no idea, but he's confident that his relationship with the Scarab is genuine and that he will be able to resist the programming. But now that he is aware of his true purpose, the Scarab overrides Jaime, attacking Batman, breaching Oa's defenses, and letting in the Reach. And the Green Lanterns, for all their might, are overwhelmed. A whole legion of lanterns, they just can't contain him. Even Batman is physically outmatched. Inside the Scarab's virtual reality, the Scarab tells Jaime some uncomfortable truths. He is only a hero because they allowed him to be one. They encouraged his bravery and helped him, all to build other people's confidence in him, so that they would let their guard down. He is their puppet and is powerless to stop them. Given his insecurities, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this might be the end for Jaime, as it had been the end for so many other Blue Beetles. But Jaime refuses to give up. He insists that he and the Scarab are Blue Beetle together, regardless of its origin. Identity is determined by choice, not programming. Jaime's struggle with the Reach functions as a powerful metaphor for young people learning to define themselves in a world full of expectations. From family, culture, school, and social systems, adolescents are constantly handed scripts: who they should be, how they should act, and what success looks like. Like the Scarab asserting control over Jaime, these pressures can feel oppressive, leaving the individual questioning whether they are choosing their own path or if they are simply fulfilling someone else's design. The real strength of Jaime's arc is that he declares that identity is a choice, not programming. Jaime demonstrates that self-definition comes from conscious decision, from choosing which parts of inheritance, culture, or expectation to keep, reshape, or reject. This is a powerful lesson in authorship of the self, for adults as well as children. Growth is about reconciling everything that happened before and moving ahead. Jaime's victory comes from his ability to claim his own identity, asserting who he is on his own terms. Blue Beetle's story ultimately becomes a metaphor for adolescence itself, the challenge of navigating inherited pressures, resisting imposed roles, and learning to stand in the world as a person defined by choice rather than circumstances. When he tells the Lanterns to pour their ring energy into the armor, it's a gamble rooted in trust, but as Batman says, they'll all be dead in a few minutes anyway, so what have they got to lose? Jaime turns the Green Lantern energy that the Reach sought to steal into the force that frees him and ultimately the other Blue Beetles. By the end of the episode, the Guardians want to destroy all of the Scarabs entirely, but Jaime has demonstrated that he is the master of his Scarab. Even Guy Gardner can see it. He confidently stands in front of cosmic authorities and says effectively, "This power does not define me, I define it." And they allow him to continue being Blue Beetle, even if all of the other Scarabs were destroyed. Jaime Reyes begins his story believing he was chosen, that there was a reason the Scarab found him. But what he discovered is far more uncomfortable. There always was a plan, and it was evil. The Scarab wasn't searching for a hero, it was planting a sleeper agent. And that's where Blue Beetle stops being a story about fate and becomes a story about authorship. Jaime isn't defined by what chose him, he's defined by what he chooses in return. The Scarab may have been programmed with a purpose, but Jaime wasn't. Identity, in the end, isn't destiny, it's a decision. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time. When I return on Friday, I'll continue my look at the heroes of Beware the Batman by talking about a man who had a transformation forced on him, but he went on to make the best of a bad situation. Yes, we're talking about their version of Man-Bat. And next Monday, it'll be time to talk about the surprise winner of my latest The Batman Villain Poll, the rotund receptacle of all knowledge who could have been the Riddler if he hadn't been rejected by DC, the Clue Master. Hope to see you then.